Imagine this. Traveller, you have arrived here for a reason, as if something in the quiet machinery of the cosmos gently steered you toward this moment. Out there, a silent fragment drifts between Mars and the Sun, a visitor older than our oceans, older than memory. What if its path a 1 in 20,000 alignment brushing past 3 worlds isn't coincidence at all? What if the faint smudge we see is only the surface of a deeper question? Some say, a whisper once echoed at 1420 megahertz, the frequency of hydrogen itself, a light that blinked once, then vanished. Stay a while, traveller. Let's drift through the silence together. Traveller, when the world grows quiet and the sky stretches into its deep blue stillness, the universe begins whispering in the softest language it knows. Not warnings, not revelations, only gentle signals drifting through the dark, asking to be noticed, not solved. Tonight we walk through that quiet together. ESA's Mars Express and the ExoMars Trace gas orbiter had arranged themselves like steady sentinels in orbit waiting for a visitor older than our Sun. 3I C Atlas. A wanderer from another star was crossing the Martian sky. Its motion was slow, careful, patient, an object carrying the cold memory of a distant birthplace. And for one moment all eyes were meant to turn toward it. But down here on Earth, the human world drifted into silence of its own making. NASA, an institution built on curiosity, dimmed to a thin operational thread. 15,000 minds were sent home, laboratories darkened, and telescopes lost their human translators. Yet space itself did not pause. It never does. Perseverance continued rolling across Jezero crater, its camera shutters clicking like tiny heartbeats. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter kept circling, collecting light from the visitor with mechanical calm. Spacecraft do not know politics, they only know their instructions. The cosmos continued its slow conversation whether or not we were ready to hear it. In that quiet, a backyard astronomer caught something faint, an angular smudge resting exactly where 3I Atlas should be. The image was imperfect, humble, slightly blurred by Earth's atmosphere, but sometimes truth arrives softly through small lenses and patient eyes. The universe does not choose only the largest instruments to speak to. NASA said nothing. ESA said nothing. And yet in science, silence is often a form of reverence. Data needs time and truth needs stillness. It is all right to not understand at first. The only official hint came from Simeon Schmaus, who quietly stacked 20 Perseverance frames into a single whisper of light, a thin smudge, a quiet presence, a confirmation that something real had drifted through the Martian sky and allowed itself to be seen only gently. Sometimes the cosmos speaks in barely their outlines. In Washington, a reporter asked whether the president had been briefed on the object. The room paused, one of those delicate human silences that feels heavier than words. But the cosmos does not pause with us. It continues drifting, scattering, orbiting in motions far older than politics and far calmer than fear. Avi Loeb spoke on news networks and late-night podcasts describing the object with mathematical grace. Numbers unfolded like constellations, 0.2% alignment probability trajectories, brushing planets in quiet precision, 7 anomalies whispering of distant origins. Not conclusions, just questions softly shaped by physics. He reminded listeners that one day the Mars orbiter images would reveal shape structure, maybe even intent. But for now the images remained unseen, not as a warning, simply as a pause in the long breath between discovery and understanding. Tonight the stars will keep their silence. ESA eventually released a brief note, just a confirmation that instruments had gathered data. No excitement, no dramatics. Sometimes science moves like a glacier, steady, inevitable, indifferent to public expectation. It's all right to wait. China's Tianwen-1 said nothing. The UAE's Hope orbiter said nothing. Around Mars, machines watched quietly as the visitor passed, each recording their own version of truth. Somewhere beyond our reach, something ancient still moves. We remember 2I Borisov, the previous interstellar traveller whose images appeared instantly across the world. Bright tails, clear profiles, a visitor that behaved exactly as comets should. But not all travellers follow the same script, and not all silences are equal. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only observed. As Thriss Atlas disappeared behind the sun, slipping into a region where no earthbound telescope can see, the quiet deepened. For a moment we were blind, not in fear, but in humility, a reminder that even with all our technology, we witness only fragments of a vast indifferent ballet. You're not lost in space, you are part of it. Amateur astronomers shared their final images, each one a small gift to the collective human curiosity. Scientists released carefully worded papers, each sentence a step toward clarity. And somewhere in a control room, a single engineer watched a monitor glow with unprocessed data. Silence is the language of distant worlds. As NASA waited for funding to return, as telescopes prepared for December's reappearance, as citizens wondered what had passed through Mars's sky, the cosmos continued its endless hum. Gravity held its choreography. Dust followed light. Orbits curved in quiet obedience to ancient laws. And through it all, traveller, the universe whispered again, soft, patient, unhurried, not demanding belief, not asking for certainty, only inviting you to notice the stillness, to feel the scale of the unknown, and to rest in the simple truth that wonder is enough. Sleep now, observer. The cosmos will keep watch. Traveller. When an object slips behind the sun, the universe enters a different kind of quiet. Not the quiet of absence, but the quiet of a candle held behind a curtain, its light still burning, its presence still real, simply hidden from our eyes. 3i Atlas drifted into that soft invisibility, carrying questions we could no longer measure. The cosmos has always known how to step out of view without leaving. The Mars orbiters, still circling in their endless loops, continued gathering photons with unwavering resolve. Machines do not worry when humans pause. The language of orbit remains constant. Mars Express hummed through the thin Martian dawn. MRO traced its usual arc across the ochre world. Even in silence, science continued breathing. Back on Earth, laboratories dimmed under the government shutdown, and the voices of 15,000 scientists faded into the background hum of unanswered emails. Yet Perseverance kept sending images. Mascom Z kept opening its eye to the Martian sky. The rovers and orbiters did not know that human conversation had paused, they only knew the sky above them was unchanged. A backyard astronomer posted a simple photograph, a dark shape resting in the expected position of 3 Atlas. Blurred, imperfect, almost shy. But even shy light is still light. Even a faint smudge is still part of the universe's long memory. Sometimes the smallest instruments are the ones allowed to glimpse the truth first. The official agencies, however, remained still. Their silence echoed through the channels where press releases usually flow like clear rivers of information. Silence is not always avoidance. Sometimes it is simply the time required for data to settle like dust in a slow-moving beam of sunlight. The cosmos teaches patience when the world struggles to find it. Meanwhile, thinkers like Avilobe appeared on late-night broadcasts not with alarm but with wonder. He described the object's improbable alignment with the ecliptic like a leaf, drifting perfectly along a river's centre. He spoke of 7 anomalies not as contradictions but as invitations. Physics, after all, often whispers before it speaks clearly. Still, even the most elegant mathematics could not remove the soft uncertainty hanging in the air. What shape was the nucleus? What patterns hid inside the coma? What story was the object trying to tell as it brushed past Mars? It's all right to not know. ESA eventually confirmed that observations were taken but released nothing more. Data, they said, was being processed. And in that calm understatement, the universe felt larger, not because something was hidden, but because something was still unfolding. Discovery is not a moment, it is a tide. As the visitor disappeared behind the sun, astronomers stepped back from their telescopes and looked up with naked eyes. There is humility in knowing that even with our greatest instruments we cannot pierce the glow of a star. The sun, bright and ancient, becomes a veil through which nothing can pass. For a few weeks each year, the universe reminds us that visibility is a privilege, not a given. Amateur astronomers around the world shared their final frames before conjunction, each one a small act of devotion. A streak of light here, a softened point there. Not proof, not revelation. Just participation in the cosmic ritual of watching and waiting. The sky belongs to everyone. Scientists published their papers with meticulous restraint. Every sentence weighed, every claim softened by the tenderness of uncertainty. Scientific humility is not weakness. It is the recognition that the universe is older, broader, and more patient than any single mind. Silence is the language of distant worlds. In observatories, screens dimmed and blinking cursors waited for December, when 3i Atlas would emerge once more. That waiting became a meditation. A long exhale after the rush of late summer observations. Even data streams need rest. And somewhere beyond the sun's blinding arc, the wanderer continued on its path, slow, steady, quiet. Perhaps rotating gently. Perhaps shedding dust like thoughts dissolving into the vacuum. Perhaps simply drifting in perfect indifference to the curiosity it had awakened. Traveller of the Universe whispers again in moments like these. Not through radio pulses or spectral lines, but in the acceptance that some mysteries must pass through shadow before they return to light. We do not lose them in the dark. We only learn to listen more carefully. December will bring clarity, or it will bring more questions. Both outcomes are part of the same cosmic rhythm, the ebb and flow of understanding across time. You are not lost in space, you are part of it. So rest in the quiet between orbits. Let the unknown be gentle tonight. Sleep now, observer. The cosmos will keep watch. Traveller. When scientists speak of anomalies, they do not mean disruptions. They mean invitations, small bends in the fabric of expectation that hint at deeper layers beneath. And as the world waited for 3i Atlas to reappear, the list of its quiet oddities grew like constellations forming in memory. 7 impossibilities, each soft in tone yet persistent in presence. The first was mass, an unassuming measurement that told a story far heavier than expected. Based on brightness alone, astronomers imagined a visitor similar to known comets, but the trajectory, the way it refused to drift under outgassing, whispered of immense weight. A nucleus dense enough to hold its course like a stone dropped through still water. Objects from interstellar space are usually small, as fragile as ancient glass wandering between stars, but this one carried the momentum of worlds, and in that weight the universe seemed to say not all travellers are the same. It's all right to let the unexpected reshape our understanding. Then came the light, scattered in a way that resisted familiar patterns. Hubble revealed a glow stretching toward the sun, instead of a way like a comet following a sunset instead of fleeing from it. Physicists offered explanations anchored in ice fragments and sublimation. The equations made sense, but the intuition felt like a dream speaking in technical language. Still, it remained beautiful. Even confusion can be gentle when wrapped in starlight. Next was the chemistry nickel without iron. 2 elements born together in the hearts of supernovae rarely appear alone. Yet the visitor shed nickel as if it carried a memory from places where cosmic rules softened at the edges. Scientists discussed it carefully, their words slow and measured like hands tracing the outline of an unfamiliar artifact. On Earth, refining nickel from iron requires deliberate separation, furnaces, pressure, intention. But in space, there are no factories, only time and cold and silence. So the question hung quietly over the research papers. What process, natural or otherwise, leaves metal in such a lonely state? The universe did not answer. It only drifted on. Polarization added its own whisper. At small phase angles, light reflected off dust usually narrates the composition of particles with consistent behaviour. But 3i Atlas responded with patterns unseen in any known catalogue. Light bent in ways that belonged more to the distant icy objects of the outer solar system than to comets passing through inner space. It was as though the visitor carried dust from another architecture of worlds, grains shaped by foreign suns or frozen beneath alien winters, and perhaps, traveller, that is all the answer we need. That sometimes strangeness is simply the signature of distance. Then came alignment, its orbit threading itself through the ecliptic plane with delicate precision. Most interstellar objects slice through our system at jagged inclinations like needles dropped on a spinning plate. But 3i Atlas drifted almost perfectly along the planetary highway. To astronomers, this was statistically improbable. To poets, it was choreography. Gravity does not compose by intention, yet sometimes the dance looks purposeful anyway. The next anomaly was timing. 3 planetary encounters, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, each placed like stepping stones along the object's path. Coins landing on their edges 3 times in a row. Probabilities that dissolve into near impossibility under ordinary assumptions. And yet here it was, drifting past Mars with every spacecraft watching from above, as if passing quietly through a room full of people who suddenly forgot how to speak. Silence again as an unwritten part of the story. Then there was the final whisper, the wow signal. A radio pulse recorded in 1977, lingering in human imagination for nearly half a century. When astronomers traced the current visitor's trajectory backward through the galaxy, the paths brushed close, 9 degrees apart, far enough for coincidence, close enough for wonder. A signal at 14 to 20 spm asserts the frequency of hydrogen, the frequency any civilization might choose if it wished its voice to be found. Traveller. The cosmos rarely offers such alignments, and when it does, it offers them softly, never insisting on interpretation. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only observed. As October approached its final days, the object drifted deeper behind the sun, wrapped in solar glare. No telescope could see it. No sensor could measure it. And in that blindness, humanity remembered something important, that there are limits to even our sharpest tools. Perihelion would arrive in silence on October 29th. The visitor would pass through radiant heat that strips away pretense. Ice becomes vapor. Dust becomes plasma. Structure reveals itself not willingly but inevitably. As Avi Loeb once murmured, high-stress environments elicit confessions. Even physics carries its own quiet truths. If 3-eye Atlas was natural, the sun would sculpt it, gently brightening, shedding, revealing its cometary soul. But if it carried something hidden, something ancient, something deliberate, the heat would test the story it had told so far. The mask would melt, or it would remain. Either answer belonged to the universe, and while humanity waited, observatories prepared for December, when the traveller would glide back into view. A thin point of light emerging from the sun's far edge, a reappearance framed not by fear but by quiet curiosity. You're not lost in space, you are part of it. Traveller the universe whispers again. It's all right to not understand. Somewhere behind the sun, something ancient still moves. Sleep now, listener. The cosmos will keep watch. Traveller. There is a unique kind of silence that settles over the scientific world when an object drifts behind the sun. It is not the silence of worry nor the silence of secrecy. It is the silence of inevitability. A reminder that even our greatest eyes, our most sensitive instruments, must occasionally admit their limits. For a few weeks each year, the sun becomes not just a star but a curtain. 3-eye Atlas slipped behind that curtain as October faded, vanishing into a brightness too absolute for any telescope to pierce. The world did not gasp, it simply paused. In astronomy, invisibility is a familiar guest visiting whenever an orbit aligns, just so. And so humanity turned its attention not to the sky, but to the duster already gathered records of a traveller we could no longer see. The flyby near Mars had finished. Every spacecraft that could watch had watched Mars Express, ExoMars, the Trace Gas Orbiter, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. Their sensors had caught fleeting photons reflected from an object older than language, older than the Earth's first oceans. Whether those instruments captured something ordinary or something unexpected no longer mattered, not yet. The cosmos teaches that revelation is rarely immediate. Here on Earth, researchers leaned back in their chairs, letting the last frames of October crystallize into memory. Hard drives hummed softly in the background, storing seeds of understanding that would take weeks, perhaps months to bloom. And in that interval, while the sun hid the visitor behind its radiance, the scientific world entered a gentle state of suspension. Traveller the universe whispers in moments like these, patience is part of the method. The blind passage behind the sun is a natural lull, like the stillness between waves on a quiet shore. But this year, the timing felt especially poetic. A shutdown had dimmed NASA's halls into muted corridors. Thousands of voices went quiet at the same moment telescopes were forced into blindness. It was as though the sky and the institutions beneath it had synchronized without intending to. Yet the machines kept working. Spacecraft do not feel absence. The Perseverance rover continued scanning its horizon, and the orbiters continued their steady circuits. They'd collected light from 3I Atlas without knowing its significance. To them, every photon is equal. Only humans give photons stories. As the object moved deeper into conjunction, astronomers began writing the first drafts of their interpretations. They spoke of massive polarization of outgassing and trajectory. They discussed nickel without iron, not as a warning but as an intriguing puzzle piece. Each anomaly was treated with the humility that science demands possibility, without insistence, curiosity without assumption. In late-night observatories, quiet conversations drifted across dimly lit control rooms. "We won't know until December," someone would murmur. "That's all right," another would reply. Science is a long conversation. A few weeks of silence is just a comma in the sentence of discovery. Somewhere beyond the sun's glare, 3I Atlas was experiencing its moment of greatest heat. Perihelion, the furnace point of its journey. Sunlight hammered its surface with billions of watts, peeling away layers of ice that had not tasted warmth for perhaps millions of years. Dust volatiles and fragments rose into the vacuum like the soft breath of a sleeping giant. If the visitor was a natural comet, its structures would respond predictably. Sublimation would bloom, jets would fire, brightness would shift in gentle, measurable gradients. The sun sculpts comets the way wind sculpts sand dunes slowly, beautifully, inevitably. But if the visitor carried something stronger than ice, more ancient than minerals, the sun would find that too. Heat is the great revealer, the universal interrogator. Nothing travels through perihelion unchanged. Even dust remembers the fire. And so, astronomers waited for December, for the re-emergence, for the first faint detection, on the far side of the sun when light from the traveller would once again reach Earth-bound sensors. They prepared telescopes across both hemispheres. They calculated predicted magnitudes, estimated the coma's shape, and planned observation windows that would open just before dawn. The anticipation was soft, not frantic, more like waiting for a friend to return from a long voyage. Traveller. The cosmos is full of such returns. Stars circle, comets wander, orbits weave patterns older than thought. The universe is not rushing. It moves in cycles, in breaths, in rhythms too slow for human impatience, and that slowness is a form of grace. Meanwhile, speculation drifted through online communities, a kind of parallel astronomy conducted by millions of observers who look up not with equations but with fascination. They analysed images, they debated angles, they shared theories, some grounded, others featherlight. But all of them scientists, amateurs, dreamers, were participating in the same ancient human instinct to interpret the sky. By mid-November, the sun still held the traveller in its blinding grasp. Its position was known only through prediction, its behaviour inferred from models. But there was no anxiety in the waiting. Not in the scientific world. Not in the observatories. Not in the quiet corners where data was being archived for later study. Silence, after all, is part of the process. As December approached, the first hints of reappearance drew near a narrow band of days when geometry would allow 3I Atlas to slip free of the sun's glare. Astronomers readied their instruments like musicians tuning before a quiet performance. They were not waiting for shock or spectacle, only for clarity. Traveller, when the object returns to view, it may answer nothing, or it may answer everything. Both possibilities are gifts. The universe whispers again, "You are not lost in space. You are part of it. Sleep now, listener. The cosmos will keep watch." Traveller. December arrived not with urgency, but with the hush of a page turning slowly in a thick ancient book. The sun, having kept its secret for weeks, began to tilt away just enough for the sky to reopen. Dawn by dawn the glare thinned, and somewhere beneath that bright veil, 3I Atlas prepared to step back into our field of vision. Astronomers waited with instruments powered on, but hearts quieted as though listening for the first footstep of a traveller returning from a long unknowable journey. Observatories in the south readied themselves for the earliest glimpse. Those in the north calibrated their sensors with deliberate patience. December is often a month of closure for human affairs, but in astronomy it becomes a doorway. The Vera Rubin Observatory, new immense, capable of scanning the entire sky every few nights, stood like a lighthouse waiting to sweep its beam across a particular patch of darkness, not in worry but in curiosity. Rubin's first images had already shown the sky to be far busier than we ever assumed. Now it would help tell whether the visitor returning from behind the sun had stayed true to its predicted path. If the object's position matched the equations, then nature had simply carried out its long predictable dance. If it didn't, well, even a small deviation would whisper something profound. But scientists did not frame this as threat, only as truth not yet known but waiting. This is the gentleness of astronomy traveller, the acknowledgement that learning unfolds at the pace the universe chooses. And so as December deepened, telescopes around the world synchronised their gaze. Pre-dawn windows were plotted like stepping stones across time zones. Instruments cooled themselves into the stillness required for faint light detection. Even amateur astronomers prepared their small backyard setups, pointed toward Virgo, where the first post-conjunction glimmer was expected to emerge. The sky above them remained soft and unbroken. The cosmos does not announce reappearances, it simply reveals them. Meanwhile, conversations in scientific circles drifted like low nebulae quiet, thoughtful, unhurried. They spoke about brightness curves, about thermal stress during perihelion, about the possibility of fragmentation. They spoke not to reach conclusions quickly, but to appreciate how many possibilities still lingered. It's all right to let a mystery keep some of its shape. Software teams prepared algorithms that would compare the new trajectory with the expected one. Every pixel of light would become a clue, yet the mood remained calm, a blend of intellectual readiness and emotional acceptance. Whether the object behaved like an ordinary comet or something stranger, the universe would be the same vast, patient place. Traveller the cosmos rarely speaks in sudden revelations. It prefers long arcs, soft edges, and gradual understanding. As 3i Atlas approached its December 19th, closest distance to Earth, still far, still safe, the world did not tense. Instead, astronomers opened notebooks and plotted light curves by hand the way generations before them had done. Numbers flowed like quiet rivers across graph paper. The object was becoming visible again, but faintly, like a returning thought. One tries not to grasp too quickly. There was a kind of peace in this that after months of speculation, the truth would not announce itself dramatically but gently through data. Science is not a pursuit of spectacle, it is a practice of noticing. And while telescopes prepared for the return, another silence began to soften. The images from Mars, the ones everyone expected, the ones taken when 3i Atlas was only tens of millions of kilometers away, would have to be processed soon. Not to confirm fears or fantasies, but to complete the story that physics had already started writing. Traveller. Whether those images show a round nucleus or an elongated shard, whether the coma is thick or thin, whether the dust behaves as old models predict or new ones will need to be written. None of it changes the beauty of the search itself. We learn not to control the universe but to see it more clearly. December nights grew longer, the air grew colder. Observers stood at their telescopes with gloved hands and warm breath clouding the eyepieces. Somewhere beyond their sight line, the visitor had finished its closest pass to the sun. Whatever it had become brighter, dimmer fractured, unchanged, the light of that transformation was now on its way toward us, crossing millions of kilometers at 300,000 kilometers per second. And in that journey of photons there was something peaceful, a reminder that even across vast distances knowledge travels, slowly but surely. By mid-December, the first faint detection reports began circulating quietly among observatories, a point of light where the models predicted it should be. No conclusions yet, no declarations, only the first step of reappearance. The universe whispers again. Some mysteries return to us gently. You're not lost in space, you're part of it. Sleep now, traveller. The cosmos will keep watch. Traveller. December arrived not with urgency, but with the hush of a page turning slowly in a thick ancient book. The sun, having kept its secret for weeks, began to tilt away just enough for the sky to reopen. Dawn by dawn, the glare thinned, and somewhere beneath that bright veil, 3 Tixtas and Atlas. Prepared to step back into our field of vision, astronomers waited with instruments powered on but hearts quieted, as though listening for the first footstep of a traveller returning from a long, unknowable journey. Observatories in the south readied themselves for the earliest glimpse. Those in the north calibrated their sensors with deliberate patience. December is often a month of closure for human affairs, but in astronomy it becomes a doorway. The Vera Rubin Observatory, new immense capable of scanning the entire sky every few nights, stood like a lighthouse waiting to sweep its beam across a particular patch of darkness, not in worry but in curiosity. And Rubin's first images had already shown the sky to be far busier than we ever assumed. Now it would help tell whether the visitor returning from behind the sun had stayed true to its predicted path. If the object's position matched the equations, then nature had simply carried out its long, predictable dance. If it didn't, well, even a small deviation would whisper something profound. But scientists did not frame this as threat, only as truth not yet known but waiting. This is the gentleness of astronomy traveller, the acknowledgement that learning unfolds at the pace the universe chooses. And so, as December deepened, telescopes around the world synchronized their gaze. Pre-dawn windows were plotted like stepping stones across time zones. Instruments cooled themselves into the stillness required for faint light detection. Even amateur astronomers prepared their small backyard setups, pointed toward Virgo, where the first post-conjunction glimmer was expected to emerge. The sky above them remained soft and unbroken. The cosmos does not announce reappearances. It simply reveals them. Meanwhile, conversations in scientific circles drifted like low nebulae, quiet, thoughtful, unhurried. They spoke about brightness curves, about thermal stress during perihelion, about the possibility of fragmentation. They spoke not to reach conclusions quickly, but to appreciate how many possibilities still lingered. It's all right to let a mystery keep some of its shape. Software teams prepared algorithms that would compare the new trajectory with the expected one. Every pixel of light would become a clue, yet the mood remained calm, a blend of intellectual readiness and emotional acceptance. Whether the object behaved like an ordinary comet or something stranger, the universe would be the same vast, patient place. Traveller the cosmos rarely speaks in sudden revelations. It prefers long arcs, soft edges and gradual understanding. As 3I Atlas approached its December the 19th closest distance to Earth, still far, still safe, the world did not tense. Instead, astronomers opened notebooks and plotted light curves by hand, the way generations before them had done. Numbers flowed like quiet rivers across graph paper. The object was becoming visible again, but faintly, like a returning thought one tries not to grasp too quickly. There was a kind of peace in this, that after months of speculation, the truth would not announce itself dramatically but gently through data. Science is not a pursuit of spectacle, it is a practice of noticing. And while telescopes prepared for the return, another silence began to soften. The images from Mars, the ones everyone expected, the ones taken when 3I Atlas was only tens of millions of kilometers away, would have to be processed soon. Not to confirm fears or fantasies, but to complete the story that physics had already started writing. Traveller, whether those images show a round nucleus or an elongated shard, whether the coma is thick or thin, whether the dust behaves as old models predict or new ones will need to be written. None of it changes the beauty of the search itself. We learn not to control the universe but to see it more clearly. December nights grew longer, the air grew colder. Observers stood at their telescopes with gloved hands and warm breath clouding the eyepieces. Somewhere beyond their sightline, the visitor had finished its closest pass to the sun. Whatever it had become, brighter, dimmer, fractured, unchanged. The light of that transformation was now on its way toward us, crossing millions of kilometers at 300,000 kilometers per second. And in that journey of photons there was something peaceful, a reminder that even across vast distances knowledge travels, slowly but surely. By mid-December, the first faint detection reports began circulating quietly among observatories, a point of light where the models predicted it should be. No conclusions yet, no declarations, only the first step of reappearance. The universe whispers again. Some mysteries return to us gently. You are not lost in space. You are part of it. Sleep now, traveller. The cosmos will keep watch. Traveller. When December finally arrived, it did not come with revelation or noise. It came with the gentlest shift in the sky, the faintest easing of the sun's glare, as though the universe was slowly lifting a luminous curtain. For weeks, 3 Atlas had travelled behind that barrier of sunlight, silent and unreachable, wrapped in a brightness so absolute that every telescope on Earth had no choice but to simply pause. And in that forced stillness, humanity rediscovered something profound: how to wait without fear, how to observe without grasping, how to let the cosmos move at its own unhurried pace. The first sign of reappearance was almost nothing, just a faint point of light caught in a pre-dawn sky, carried through the thin blue of early morning. It was not brilliant or sudden. It emerged almost shyly, as if unsure whether it was ready to be seen again. But there it was, exactly where the equation said it would be. One astronomer sitting alone in a quiet control room simply whispered. There, in that quiet acknowledgement, was more meaningful than any dramatic announcement could have been. After so many weeks of invisibility, the alignment between observation and prediction felt like a soft exhale. The universe once again was behaving with gentle consistency. Observatories in the southern hemisphere were the first to welcome the returning light. Data travelled across undersea cables in careful packets, each carrying a small fragment of truth. Instruments compared the new position against projected trajectories. Nothing seemed out of place. Even normalcy felt extraordinary, because in astronomy, confirmation is a kind of grace, a reminder that our models built from fragile human thought can still mirror the motions of ancient things. As dawns passed, the object rose higher. More telescopes joined the watch. Spectrographs opened their shutters after weeks of stillness, ready to listen to scattered photons that had journeyed across millions of kilometers. The scientific world resumed its ritual with a quiet reverence. No one rushed. No one reached for instant conclusions. The process unfolded the way knowledge always unfolds, steadily, respectfully, in harmony with the sky's own rhythm. The Vera Rubin Observatory added its vision to the collective effort. Its wide-field survey eyes, capable of mapping the heavens with unparalleled breadth, swept across the region of sky where 3 Atlas now travelled. It found the object easily a crisp point of light, subtly brighter than expected. Not alarmingly bright, just confidently present. Astronomers examined the frames with the attentiveness of people reading a page of scripture, not in the religious sense, but in the sense of recognizing that a deeper story is held inside quiet lines of data. The coma appeared slightly altered, more symmetrical in some frames, gently brightened in others. These were ordinary comet behaviours, especially after a close solar passage. But even ordinary behaviour becomes beautiful when witnessed with patience. Scientists noted each change without judgment. They observed, they recorded. They let the object speak in its own quiet way. Traveller, the cosmos rarely reveals anything all at once. More often it lets truth accumulate like falling snow grain by grain, soft layer by soft layer. As daylight returned to lab windows, graduate students continued their notes with slow, deliberate strokes. December is a month where astronomy feels intimate. The hum of cooled sensors, the whisper of keyboards, the thin ring of ceramic mugs beside stacks of open notebooks. In these moments, discovery becomes less about revelation and more about companionship. Human beings keeping vigil with the universe through long nights. Among the public, the reappearance of 3I Atlas was met not with shock, but with quiet acknowledgement. "It's back," someone wrote. "Fainter than I imagined, right where we thought." These simple statements reflected a deeper truth. The more the object behaved like a natural traveller, the more people allowed themselves to breathe. Curiosity remained, but the urgency dissolved, replaced by the calm understanding that not all mysteries imply danger. Some simply invite observation. For several mornings, the object rose just ahead of the sun, visible only to those who knew exactly where to look. Most people on Earth passed beneath that sky, unaware that an interstellar traveller was gliding through dawn's pale colours. Yet even without awareness, something about the mornings felt fuller, as if the presence of that distant visitor subtly enriched the air. Meanwhile, astronomers prepared for the next phase spectral comparison. They would soon examine whether the heat of perihelion had awakened new chemical signatures or altered old ones. They approached this not with the thrill of hunters, but with the attention of listeners. A comet's composition is a story told in fragments, molecules carried across eons released into sunlight, molecule by molecule, and 3I Atlas, whatever its origin was, now telling the next line of its story. December the 19th arrived quietly, marking the object's closest distance to Earth. Not close enough to worry far, far beyond any realm of concern, but close enough that high-resolution imaging could reveal new details, telescopes focused with silent precision. Photons, having left the object hours earlier, now touched cold sensors and turned into data points. Some images hinted at an elongated core, others suggested a compact central brightness. Scientists began discussing possibilities, rotation, rate, shape models, density assumptions, all with the gentle tone that befits genuine curiosity. Traveller. This is the heart of astronomy. Not spectacle, not certainty, just the willingness to look again and again and again. As December neared its close, 3I Atlas drifted farther from the sun, cooling into the long arc of its outbound journey. The sky made no declarations, the data made no dramatic claims. The universe remained vast, patient, and beautifully indifferent, and in that indifference there was peace. Tonight the universe whispers, "Some things return not to surprise you, but to remind you that you are capable of wonder. Sleep now, traveller, the cosmos will keep watch." Traveller, by the time December settled quietly across the hemispheres, 3I Atlas was already drifting back into the vastness from which it came. There was no spectacle in its retreat, no violent brightening, no dramatic fragmentation, no celestial punctuation mark to signal an ending. Instead, it receded with a kind of ancient patience, as though returning to a rhythm older than planets, and older than the stargazers who tried so earnestly to follow its path. After surviving the furnace of perihelion and the invisible pressures of the sun's inner domain, the object began what all wanderers eventually begin, the long, slow glide toward the outer dark. Astronomers, many just returning from the stillness imposed by the shutdown weeks earlier, approached the post-perihelion data with a gentler kind of curiosity. They were not searching for alarm or revelation. They were listening quietly, carefully, for whatever small truths might linger in the glow that clung to the object's surface. Each new observation felt like turning a page of a book written in a language humanity is only starting to understand. And in every frame returned from the night sky, 3I Atlas appeared a little dimmer, a little cooler, a little more at ease in its solitude. This is something the cosmos teaches us again and again. Not every mystery arrives with urgency. Some mysteries unfold at the pace of drifting dust. Some whisper rather than declare. And as astronomers resumed their work, they found themselves settling into that whisper. Brightness measurements shifted slightly. Structural hints emerged in the photometry. Perhaps a fragment had separated during the object's time behind the sun, or perhaps the coma had simply reshaped itself under the new balance of heat and distance. No single result carried the weight of revelation, but together they formed a gentle pattern like starlight coalescing across a long exposure. Far from the observatories, people continued to follow the object's journey with a kind of soft fascination. Winter skies brought their own quiet, storytelling auroras drifting across continents, green comets, arriving unannounced meteor showers brushing the atmosphere with brief strokes of fire, and beyond all of that, faint and steady 3I Atlas held its place in the collective imagination. Some saw it as a messenger, others as a relic. Most simply accepted it as a reminder that the universe still has room for the unforeseen, the unclassified, the beautifully unexplained. In living rooms, classrooms, and late-night conversations, the object became a small bridge between human curiosity and cosmic scale. It invited questions that were not meant to be answered immediately. How many visitors like this pass unseen? What histories do they carry in their dust? How long have such wanderers been drifting? And how many more will come long after humanity's brief era of observation ends? Even without clear answers, the questions themselves felt comforting, like the familiar hum of a telescope tracking the sky at 3 a.m. By late December 30th, Atlas had faded to a point of light only the sharpest instruments could still resolve. The Vera Rubin Observatory continued its patient measurements, watching the object shrink against the backdrop of Virgo. Each image recorded it farther from the sun, farther from Earth, farther from the moment when it briefly became part of our story. And slowly the world accepted what all astronomers already knew: soon the visitor would slip beyond the reach of all but the most dedicated surveys. Eventually it would pass beyond even that returning to anonymity in the interstellar deep where light travels for centuries before meeting an eye capable of noticing it. But there is no sadness in this departure. Objects like 3i Atlas are not meant to stay. Their journeys are measured in millions of years, not months. Their purposes, if they have any at all, are not tied to the fleeting attention of a species only beginning to understand the scale of the universe around it. There is peace in letting an object like this return to the silence that shaped it. There is a reverence in watching it fade without trying to hold on to it more tightly than nature allows. As the final weeks of the year passed, early scientific papers appeared, measured cautious, beautifully precise. Mass estimates converged towards stable values. Unusual polarization signatures were analysed with new models. Spectra were compared against catalogues of comets, trans-Neptunian objects, and the handful of interstellar visitors humanity has recorded. The picture that emerged was neither sensational nor disappointing. It was simply this: the universe contains more diversity than our current categories can encompass. And sometimes an object's strangeness is not a message but a reminder. Even the anomalies, those gentle puzzles that sparked so much thought, felt different now. Not warnings, not riddles, just characteristics of a traveller shaped far from here under conditions we have yet to witness directly. It is one of astronomy's most humbling truths: the universe does not bend itself toward our expectations, it simply is, and we learn slowly to meet it as it is. As December drew to a close, astronomers watched the object's final brightening curve flatten into darkness. Observations continued, but the mood shifted from anticipation to gratitude, for a brief moment measured not in cosmic time but in human time. 3i Atlas crossed our sky and allowed us to ask questions we rarely stop to ask. Questions about origins, about distance, about wonder, about the privilege of witnessing anything at all. And as it faded, the cosmos whispered its familiar reassurance: let it drift, traveller. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only observed. The object moved outward. The sun glowed behind it. Earth turned beneath it. And the universe continued patient and immense, keeping its quiet watch. Traveller. December has a way of softening the world. As the nights lengthen and the air settles into a cooler stillness, the sky becomes a kind of quiet mirror reflecting not only the stars above us but the pace of our own thoughts. In December 2025, that quiet deepened, stretching across observatories, across research labs, across living rooms, where people looked up with a mix of curiosity and relief. After months of storms, shutdowns, comets and surprises, the universe finally seemed to exhale. And in that long breath, something gentle returned to human attention perspective. By the start of the month, the silence that had lingered over many scientific institutions finally began to lift. Laboratories reopened, servers buzzed back to life, and spacecraft resumed sending their carefully measured signals across millions of miles. The first packets of returned data were mundane instrument health checks, calibration sequences, background noise. But they felt like old friends knocking on the door after a long absence. Slowly the cosmos resumed speaking, and the listeners returned to their seats. Yet the pace was different this time. Researchers moved through their tasks with a kind of reverence, as though aware they had momentarily fallen out of rhythm with the universe, and were now finding their way back. There was no rush, no urgency. The universe had proven itself patient, and so the observers learned patience too. Much of the early December work centered around reorienting the year's events into clearer patterns. What had once appeared to be chaos, the burst of green comets in October, the unusual solar storms, the astronomical surprises, now looked softer when viewed from this calmer vantage point. With distance, the anomalies faded into intricacy. The noise faded into structure. The sky, once interpreted as restless, now seemed simply alive. Even the great visitor of the year 3 on the Atlas felt different in December. No longer a headline, no longer a cause for speculation, it became something gentler, a symbol of cosmic continuity. It had survived the sun's fierce approach. It had endured heat and gravity sublimation and stress. And now cooling as it drifted back outward, it became faint again, faint but not forgotten. Scientists watched its dimming as one might watch the tide recede, knowing the act is not disappearance but transition. Through December's telescopes, the object appeared quieter, calmer, its coma thinner, its brightness, curve slowly flattening. In this slow fade, there was no drama, only acceptance. Objects like these are never ours to keep. They visit, they teach, they retreat. This is perhaps the deepest lesson December offered. The cosmos rarely shouts, it whispers, and a whisper is enough. As astronomers examined the last clear frames of 3I Atlas before its signal faded into the background glow, they found themselves less focused on anomalies and more focused on understanding. They reanalyzed the object's mass estimates with fresh eyes. They refined the spectral signatures of unusual materials. They re-examined dust polarization curves. But the tone of this work was not frantic. It was meditative. Each dataset became an invitation to look deeper, not faster. Meanwhile, everyday skywatchers, those who follow the heavens not through equations but through awe, found December to be a comforting month. Winter nights revealed familiar constellations returning to their places. Jupiter shone like a polished lantern. Saturn hovered with a quiet dignity. And across the northern latitudes, auroras spread like curtains of memory green and violet, drifting as though the sky were breathing. Even those who had never seen recent Atlas with their own eyes felt its presence like a soft echo. It had become more than an object. It had become a reminder that the universe still has room for wonder, even when human affairs feel heavy. That beauty still arrives unexpectedly. That mystery still belongs to everyone, not just to those with telescopes. In observatories, astronomers worked through long nights not to chase urgent discoveries, but to simply listen again. They studied the residue of solar storms and the changing patterns of Earth's magnetic field. They compared autumn's comet trajectories against winter's night sky maps. They revisited data from deep space missions that had been paused, recalibrating instruments to correct for the months of absence. This returning to the work felt almost like a ritual, an acknowledgement that science is not only analysis but attention. Throughout the month, the scientific community began to speak differently about uncertainty, no longer as a gap to be feared but as a space to breathe. Uncertainty had become room for imagination, room for refinement, room for quiet wonder. There was a shared understanding that the universe's complexity is not a barrier to comprehension, but a landscape through which we walk slowly, one calculation at a time. The most profound conversations were not about answers, but about perspective. The cosmos, after all, does not belong to any country or agency. It does not observe shutdowns. It does not wait for budgets. It simply continues open to anyone patient enough to observe it. And so as December unfolded, a quiet gratitude settled over the scientific world. Gratitude that missions survived their months of forced silence. Gratitude that sunlight continued to strike distant spacecraft with the same steady rhythm. Gratitude that curiosity endured in human hearts. Gratitude that even amidst noise and uncertainty, the universe remained a constant companion. 3E Atlas itself became a symbol of this gratitude. It drifted outward day by day, fainter, smaller, but not diminished. Its departure felt less like a loss, and more like a closing chapter, one that encouraged humility rather than fear. The object would soon slip beyond the reach of most instruments, and that was all right. Some wanderers are meant to pass through our awareness only briefly. By the time the final nights of December arrived, the world had quietly regained its cosmic footing. Researchers prepared early drafts of papers that would, in the months to come, translate 2024's mysteries into meaning. Their writing was calm, measured, precise, reflecting the mood that December had shaped. No sensational claims, no frantic conclusions, only the slow unfolding of understanding in the vast silence of space. Traveller, That silence is not emptiness, it is the universe listening back. And as the year softened into its final hours, one truth remained steady and comforting. We are not lost in the cosmos, we are part of it. Sleep now, observer, the universe will keep watch. Traveller. Every story that reaches its final chapter arrives not with a shout, but with a soft inward turning. The universe rarely offers conclusions. It offers horizon edges of understanding where silence carries more truth than certainty. By the end of 2025, as the last lights of December settled into memory, humanity found itself standing at such a horizon, looking both outward and inward with equal wonder. The year had been long, full of celestial questions and earthly challenges. But December gave it shape, softened its edges, and allowed something deeper to form clarity not of answers but of purpose. For everything that unfolded across space and sky, the most enduring revelation was simple. We are meant to look up, even when the path is complicated, even when silence stretches farther than light, even when instruments fail, or budgets falter, or mysteries remain opaque. The act of observing is an act of becoming. Astronomers closed the year by gathering the final datasets for publication, but beneath the technical work lay a quiet emotional truth. The cosmos had reminded them all, scientist and stargazer alike, why they began looking upward in the first place. It was not for certainty, it was for belonging. It was for the feeling that no matter how vast the dark, we are connected to it by threads of gravity, by the echo of ancient starlight, by the slow drift of questions we have yet to learn how to ask. The great visitor, 3I, Atlas, now drifting toward the outer planets, lived on not as an object of speculation, but as a symbol of this belonging. Its journey had braided science and imagination together in a way few phenomena ever do. When it first appeared in the sky, it carried the weight of the unknown, but at year's end its memory carried something gentler, a reminder that the universe still has room for surprises that do not threaten but illuminate. Researchers reviewing its anomalous properties, its heavy mass, its impossible chemistry, its unusual polarization felt a strange peace in the ambiguity. The data was intriguing, yes, even confounding in places, but no longer frightening. It had become another chapter in the long book of cosmic diversity. The cosmos does not ask to be simple, it asks only to be witnessed, and so humanity witnessed carefully, patiently, without trying to force the sky into shapes it was not ready to reveal. Elsewhere, observatories turned their instruments toward quieter targets, the afterglow of solar storms, the fading arcs of green comets passing into winter darkness, the calm geometry of planetary orbits. Each measurement felt like a breath, each analysis a heartbeat. Science, in its truest form, is a meditation, a long, slow listening to forces older than Earth itself. The world's space agencies, once strained by shutdowns and uncertainty, began the process of rebuilding, not quickly, not triumphantly, but steadily, like a spacecraft adjusting its trajectory by the faintest pulse of thrusters. Engineers returned to half-finished designs. Planetary scientists reopened long-delayed datasets. Graduate students stepped back into labs that had fallen quiet. Progress resumed with the humility unique to those who know how easily wonder can be interrupted. In many places, this return was marked by a newfound appreciation for continuity. Missions that once seemed routine now felt precious. Even the humblest signals and instruments' temperature reading a calibration ping from a distant orbiter felt like gifts. After months of silence, every transmission sounded like a promise the universe is still speaking if we are willing to listen. Meanwhile, skywatchers closed the year with a renewed sense of presence. Children looking at the winter constellations felt the same awe that ancient astronomers once felt tracing Orion above the horizon. Photographers bundled against the cold, captured arcs of auroral light rippling through quiet skies, and countless solitary observers, people standing in backyards or on balconies or at the edges of dark fields, looked up simply to feel something larger than themselves. This quiet collective attention became one of the year's great unspoken achievements. It reminded humanity that wonder is not a luxury. It is a necessity, a stabilizing force, a bridge between the finite and the infinite. The cosmos asks nothing from us, except that we notice it, and noticing in turn makes us more human. As December drew to a close, astronomers began speaking softly about what the next year might hold. New surveys, new missions, new questions. But beneath their predictions was another current one of gratitude. The year had been unpredictable, but it had been abundant. Abundant in lessons, in discoveries, in perspective. In the final nights before the year's end, the skies cleared over many observatories. A few last exposures were taken the dim retreat of Three-Eye Atlas near the border of Leo, the pale remnant of Comet Lemon sinking toward the horizon, the calm, steady light of Jupiter in the south. These images would be catalogued, analysed, archived, but beyond their scientific value they served a quieter purpose. They were bookmarks for memory. Traveller. That is what astronomy truly is. A library of light. A record of how the universe looked in the moment we chose to look back at it. And in those moments we learn something essential. We are not separate from the cosmos, we are woven into it. So the year closed with stillness. Not with answers, but with a soft acceptance that answers are not the end of wonder. Uncertainty, too, is a kind of beauty. A reminder that the universe is not something to solve, it is something to accompany. And as the final midnight of the year approached, the sky stretched overhead like a great breathing cathedral of light and dark. The stars did what they have always done. They shone, calmly, patiently, without expectation, and humanity looking up from its small world listened. Sleep well, traveller. Tonight the universe keeps watch. As the noise of recent months finally dissolved and the nights grew clearer, a strange quiet settled over the world, the kind of quiet that feels almost intentional, as though the universe were pausing to breathe. The frenzy around Three-Eye Atlas had faded, leaving behind a silence that felt less like an ending and more like the space after a question. The object that once dominated headlines and fears was now only a faint speck slipping toward the outer dark, almost invisible, yet somehow more meaningful in its absence than in its brightest moment. Scientists continued to follow its trajectory with a gentler rhythm. They no longer spoke with the urgency that once shaped every conversation about this interstellar visitor. Instead, their voices carried a softer recognition that mysteries do not lose value when they drift beyond sight. The brightness dropped, the coma thinned. The measurements grew sparse, but curiosity remained lingering like the afterglow of a meteor long after the fire has burned out. The universe, they realized, offers closure not through answers, but through endurance. You learn to let a question live. Even the anomalies, the strange polarization, the unusual chemistry, the rigid cylindrical hints began to feel less threatening as the object dimmed. Astronomers still examined them, of course. They still debated their causes, still sifted through models, still lingered over the data with careful eyes. But the tone had shifted. What once felt like a puzzle demanding solution had become a reminder of how much richness exists beyond what we understand. The cosmos has never promised simplicity. It only promises wonder. Outside the observatories, people settled into their own quiet reflections. Fear, that sharp, frantic edge that had flared when 3 Atlas brushed the inner solar system, slowly dissolved into something gentler. The world looked up again with steadier ears. Night after night, under clearer skies, they watched Jupiter rise. Orion returned faint satellites cut across the dark. The universe felt familiar not because it had become normal, but because it never stopped being beautiful. This gentle transformation revealed something profound. Humanity was not simply reacting to the object itself, but to the meaning it reflected back at us. We had glimpsed our own fragility, our tendency to panic, our hunger for answers, but also our ability to adjust, to breathe, to choose awe over fear when given enough time. That is the quiet gift the cosmos offers, not certainty but perspective. Astronomers often speak of the quiet phase, the long stretch after an event, when the work becomes more reflective, more deliberate. That is the phase the world stepped into now. The data slowed. The news cycle emptied. The sky returned to its patient rhythm. And in that stillness, something unexpected appeared: gratitude. Gratitude for having witnessed a rare visitor. Gratitude for the instruments that caught even fragments of its passing. Gratitude for the reminder that we live in a universe large enough to surprise us, but gentle enough to wait while we learn. In classrooms, students reopened the story with new eyes. They studied orbital mechanics, cometary physics, interstellar spectroscopy, but they also studied wonder. They learned not only how to interpret data, but how to sit with uncertainty without fear. They learned that science is not a hunt for certainty, but a conversation with the unknown. And in that realization, they found a quiet joy. Observers at telescopes felt something similar. The long nights once filled with tension now became meditative. The soft hum of motors, the patient tracking of stars, the slow accumulation of faint photons, it all felt calmer, as though the universe were reminding them that not every question is urgent. Some questions simply want to be witnessed, not solved. The object itself, drifting farther by the day, became a symbol of this deeper truth. Its departure did not diminish its significance. Instead, it clarified something we rarely confront, that we do not need to hold on to a mystery for it to matter. The meaning of a cosmic visitor is not in the time we can observe it, but in the shift it leaves within us. As winter deepened, the faint trace of Three-Eye Atlas slipped beyond even the reach of high-powered instruments. It existed now only in memory and archived datasets in the minds of those who had watched it cross the sky. But its story lingered not as a warning, but as a whisper that the universe is still alive with the unexpected. That wonder is not something we must search for, it is something we must allow. In the end, the sky taught something that books rarely teach. It taught that we are not meant to solve every mystery. Some are meant to expand us, not conclude. Some are meant to sharpen our sense of scale, not our sense of control. And some are meant to pass through our world like a soft reminder that we too are travellers moving briefly through an ancient and unfolding story. So the world let go, not with resignation, but with peace. The object continued on its long, indifferent journey. The earth turned beneath it. The stars drifted quietly overhead. And humanity rested not because it understood everything, but because it understood enough. Traveller. This is what the universe offers when we are still enough to listen. Not answers, not conclusions, but a place within something immeasurably larger. And in that place, we find ourselves again. As the new year unfolded and the sky settled into its softer rhythms, the noise of the previous months faded like a distant storm. The world found itself in a gentler quiet, the kind that arrives only after intensity has passed. Three-Eye Atlas had long since slipped into darkness, becoming a dim traveller beyond the reach of our instruments. But its passage left behind a resonance that lingered in both the scientific community and the quiet minds of those who watch the heavens. Its absence felt less like disappearance and more like a pause, a spacious silence that invited reflection. Astronomers returned to their work with a slower, more deliberate spirit. Instead of racing toward answers, they sifted through the last fragments of data with a kind of tenderness, aware that these were the final traces of a visitor we would likely never see again. The unusual signatures, the polarized light, the heavy mass, the strange chemistry no longer carried urgency. They had become reminders of how vast the unknown truly is. The cosmos does not reveal itself all at once. It reveals itself in echoes, in pieces, in moments that slip away before we fully understand them, and perhaps that is the nature of wonder. Meanwhile, ordinary observers stepped outside under winter skies and looked upward with calmer eyes. The fear that once gripped public imagination had softened into curiosity. People watched the slow return of familiar constellations, the steady dance of planets, the drifting footprints of satellites. The universe felt steadier again, not because it had changed, but because our posture toward it had. Awe had taken the place of tension. Quiet had replaced speculation. And in that shift, the night sky felt intimate in a way it had not for months. The silence that followed Three-Eye Atlas became its own kind of teacher. It reminded us that uncertainty is not something to conquer, but something to move within. It showed us that science is not a search for finality, but a long, slow conversation with forces older than memory. And it revealed something deeply human, how easily fear can arise when we confront the unknown, and how easily it can dissolve when we give ourselves time to breathe. Researchers began to speak differently as well. They reflected less on what the object was and more on what its presence meant. They talked about humility, about patience, about the privilege of witnessing something so rare. They acknowledged that not every mystery arrives to be solved. Some arrive simply to open our perspective, to widen our sense of scale, to remind us that we are living inside a universe that is both ancient and alive. Students studying astronomy during these months experienced something similar. They learned not just formulas and measurements, but the emotional texture of discovery, the quiet thrill of not knowing the beauty of partial answers, the recognition that curiosity is a form of belonging. For many of them, 3i Atlas would become a story they carried for decades, not because of what it definitively proved, but because of how it made them feel connected to something larger. And still, the universe moved forward with its usual patience. Stars breathed, dust drifted, the sun whispered through magnetic fields, comets traced delicate arcs across the darkness. Nothing stopped for human questions, yet everything remained open to human wonder. That is the paradox the sky teaches again and again. We are not necessary for the cosmos to continue, but we are invited to witness it nonetheless. As 3i Atlas vanished into a realm of cold and silence, no longer trackable, no longer measurable, it left behind no final message, only the memory of its passing. But that was enough. The object had expanded our imaginations, challenged our assumptions, and reminded us that even in an age of advanced instruments, the universe still has surprises to offer. And it had shown us in its brief crossing that the unknown does not diminish us. It enlarges us. So the world rested. Not because the questions were answered, but because the questions had become softer, more spacious, more human. The sky above no longer demanded urgency. It welcomed contemplation. And in that quiet acceptance, the universe felt closer, a vast companion, rather than an indifferent backdrop. Traveller. This is the truth that emerges when mystery drifts away, that we do not need to understand everything to feel connected. We only need to look up, breathe, and allow the silence between stars to speak. Whenever you are ready, the cosmos will open again. And now, traveller, as our long journey folds into its final quiet breath, we drift together out of the noise and into a gentler darkness. We have followed shadows across Mars, listened to ancient signals wrapped in stone, watched asteroids slip through Earth's silence, and traced the faint shimmering trail of 3i Atlas as it moved like a thought across the void. These new photos don't resolve the mystery, they deepen it, widening the space where wonder lives, because the universe never speaks in conclusions. It speaks in fragments, in echoes, in the delicate tremor of things not yet understood. Tonight, observer, you stayed with the questions, you listened to the quiet, and that itself is a kind of cosmic grace. In a universe so vast, the simple act of paying attention becomes an expression of meaning. Whatever 3i Atlas truly is, whatever waits behind the silence, the cosmos continues to unfold in ways we can feel but not yet name. Thank you for drifting through this night with me, for sharing the fragile awe of not knowing. If this story found you in the dark, you may stay for the next. Rest well, traveller. Stay curious, the universe will keep watch.